So what will you do when the party's over? So what will you do when the party's over?
Hey, welcome to Third Man in the Ring. Today, I've been hounding this man for months, if not over probably a year. This referee is very dear to me. He's a friend. He's my mentor. Done awesome historic fights, and you already seen the opening. So I want you to give a warm welcome. We're gonna hear about his life, where he grew up, how he used to fight, Vietnam days, to now, where he's at today. But I want you to give him a warm welcome, my friend, your friend, Mr. Pat Russell. Thank you, Pat.
Thank you, Ray. Thank you.
It's about time. God, how long have I been begging you to come on, Pat?
I have to give Ray credit. If he got in the wrong business, should have been a salesman. There's a lot of reasons why, and I would say that up front. The reason that I didn't do this was I was trained by Jesuits, and they always taught you to be humble. That's the first thing they ever did. I think then God created marriage, and humility was the byproduct. But so I'm a humble guy. I'm doing this in the business. Ray's very over the top about what this is, but it's a pleasure and an honor to get this opportunity to talk to the boxing community through this venue.
Yes.
Thanks, Ray.
And with that said, Pat, we're gonna talk about 5 fights, guys. Bradley, how do you pronounce it? I don't want to get beat up.
Provodnikov.
What a fight. Remember that, guys? I actually showed this in the opening highlight. The second one, we're going to show Toney and Littles, another great fight. Alvarado, Rios, another great fight. And Larios and Vasquez, you already know about that one. And the ultimate fight, they're all good, but the trilogy was Vasquez and Marquez 3. You remember that one? I mean, may he rest in peace, am I right? Marquez, what a guy, man. But Pat made some awesome calls on all those fights. We're going to touch base on it. But before we start that, Pat, tell the fans, where did Pat originate at? Where'd you grow up at?
I grew up I was born in Fresno, California. I was raised in San Jose, California. And what I want to talk about today, Ray, just kind of a segue from this, is I want to talk about the culture of boxing, because I grew up in the culture of boxing. All of my uncles, which were Italian immigrants, every Friday night we would go over to their places. My uncle Giuseppe and Don and the rest of the clan, and we'd all be sitting around watching Friday night fights, Gillette Blue Blades, with Don Dunphy talking about people that we wanted to know and meet, etc., and off we went. So I grew up with that as a culture. So it wasn't alien to me to get it done.
Yeah.
And like everybody, I got involved in the culture, and I don't want to go on and on about all these titles or the fights that you have, because nothing's more boring than talking about yourself and how wonderful you are.
I'm gonna squeeze it out of them, guys. I'm gonna squeeze it out of them.
But to me, boxing had an immediate effect, and what really I enjoyed about it was I enjoyed the culture of boxing. It was the most democratic sport that I had participated in. And I participated at different levels in other sports, but there was nothing like boxing. And the reason it was that way is because more than anything else, this is one person going into that ring and facing not only an opponent, but facing the ultimate opponent, which is their own fear and apprehension about what could possibly happen. And it is totally democratic down the line. And it doesn't make any difference. You can be big, small, fat, short. Hey. Well, and not excessive weight, but you can be all of those things. And if you get matched, you're going to be having the same emotions and the same theory moving forward in the culture that you will have otherwise. So for me, it was immediately attractive.
Yeah.
The more I dug into it, the more I participated in it, the more I understood really how broad it is, because my community was a community of tough guys that were Italian guys and Irish guys and whatever, but we would have an opportunity to fight under the culture against another culture, another community, and they would have their champion and we would have it out, and at the end of it, everybody was celebrating because it was under the part of culture, and culture was the most important thing going.
I don't know why, guys, but Pat has always reminded me of East Side Boys. Have you guys ever seen that? The East Side Kids, remember? The East Side Kids.
On TV, right?
Yeah, the 40s.
Hey, easy, Ray.
What was that actor? Mickey, was it Mickey Rooney? Yeah, Mickey Rooney.
Geez, there we go, twice. He's accusing me of being that old and being that short, for God's sake. Well, go ahead, Ray, finish it off.
Back then was in black and white, no?
Yeah, color wasn't invented until the 60s, Ray, that's right.
But you know what, Pat, tell the fans, how was your childhood? Was it cool?
Well, again, when you grow up, and everybody grows up in a culture. If you don't have a culture, you adopt a culture. So mine was pretty simple. It was the 50s. I was born in the late 40s and in the 50s, and all of that was America. Post-war, I was a part of that generation, the largest generation this country's ever had. We grew up, and the culture was this. That if you were a man, you had a man's role. If you were a woman, you had a woman's role. Yeah. But for a man, for a child, for a young adult to go from childhood to adulthood, somewhere in there was service. And service, for the most part, for most of us, meant military service. And, I had a father that was horribly wounded from that war. All of my uncles, except for Uncle Joe, who had polio, all served in World War II. So the culture was the way that I was going to become an adult.
So there was really no question, you just...
Well, yes, there was a question, because in the 1960s, there was a counterculture going on.
Oh, that's right.
Which was tune in, turn on, and drop out, and don't pay attention to that nonsense. So somewhere in between is an 18-year-old kid doing all that stuff. I did that. I went to college.
And with that said, Pat, some of us don't agree with our government, but I respect our military, and I respect you for serving our country, and I appreciate it, and I thank you for that, Because I know a lot of politics nowadays, but guys, we live in the best country in the world that we can speak our piece. You go to a third world country, they'll butcher you if you speak wrong, you know what I mean?
Yep.
So, we have to appreciate our war veterans. We have to appreciate our military. But with that said, where did you serve?
So Air Force. So I came out. And like everybody, it was in those days. It was the draft. The draft doesn't exist anymore. But basically, when you turned 18 years old, if you were a young male in America, you signed up for the draft. And if your number was called, or if they decided you needed to go, boom, they owned your life for 2 years. So I was trying to work my way through college, because that was going to be a big deal in my family. Hadn't had a lot of college graduates, to say the least. So I was bobbing and weaving my way through, and I cut a deal basically with the military through a reserve officer program that if you let me graduate, I will give you 4 years of my life. And I did that. So I graduated on a Saturday. On Monday, I reported in. Dang. And, pretty quick things went out. And during the course of all that, like everybody, I got rotated into the war zone, which in those days was Vietnam. And I served my tour as an infantry platoon leader. Came back out, finished off the military.
That's deep in it, guys. That's deep in it, guys.
Well, they're all deep in it. Service is service. And so I came out, and then now I'm a married man with a baby, and what do I know how to do? I know how to be in the military. I know how to go to college, but how about a job? And then from there, I eventually ended up in law enforcement for 31 years. But to continue the service thing real quickly, Ray, and I don't want to belabor it, I wasn't finished with the service. When I was in, I had an opportunity to see it, but I saw the ultimate elite in the Army was the Special Forces. They were the people that were the hearts and minds. They were the ones working with the locals and doing all the great stuff. Yeah. It was a real challenge. And when I got out in the world, the Vietnam era, there wasn't a lot of parades or whatever else. In fact, you were ignored.
I was just going to say, weren't you kind of hated?
There was. I always heard about the hate. I never got the hate, but I don't think hate is what kills people. I think it's indifference that kills people. You can hate somebody or love somebody, but if you're indifferent to somebody, that just kills the human spirit. And I was, a young, vibrant guy. So, and I felt so bad about it that I had a particular incident that took place that stuck in my mind. And I had arrested a guy, or I was transporting a guy down, and it was some minor thing. He got drunk and had a problem with his wife, and he was on the way in there. But the more he was talking, the more I realized he was talking Vietnam stuff. He knew the language, he knew the lingo, and he was talking grunt stuff. So now we're really over there. Well, pretty quick, like most things, we found out that we were on the same fire base together. We'd actually participated in different operations, although we were with different units. Well, then it's, hey, you remember this guy? Hey, you remember that guy? And immediately we were bonded, okay?
Yeah, yeah.
So whatever he had done,
right?
Exactly. Whatever he had done, I had done. And so on the way down, we're getting there, and then all of a sudden we're going to be booked. He's going to be booked, right? So we get in, and it turns dead silence. And as he goes in, and I can still see this and feel this to this day, he turns to me, and I realized, you know, now I've got to do my job. He's got to go to jail. He turned to me and he said, hey, take it easy, brother. Stay safe. And I was so devastated knowing I couldn't do anything for that young man that I couldn't say a word. But I never forgot it, and it was really, it really struck me, really. And so I went back out. I found I found other veterans because we were individually taken overseas and individually returned. We started Vietnam Veterans of San Diego. We had a terrific program where we reached out to those kinds of folks, brought them in, and brought them back into mainstream America. It was great. I continued to serve.
Is there still, Pat, a high suicide rate with war veterans?
Among these veterans and among older veterans, yeah. And I think the reason for that is isolation. I'm not an expert and I don't want to get too deeply into it. But then the third part of that whole service, just to kind of fill it all up, was a friend of mine tapped me on the shoulder and said, look, there's a new program that's starting downtown. It's called the Veterans Treatment Court. And what it says is that if you can draw the connection between service, trauma, and this crime, instead of going to jail, you go to treatment. And walking with them, going through that treatment, is another veteran who they can, share things with and maybe get involved with. Mm-hmm. And I just got tapped and I thought, okay, I'll go down and take a look, man. I went down and it was like that kid from, 50 years ago that I had the book, I see him every time I see one of these young men out there and one of these young women. And so to me, service was just a continuum of what we do and why we do it. Sorry, kind of long-winded, Ray, but I'm glad you brought it up.
No, I mean, again, guys, we don't have to agree with our government, and thank God we have that right, but that always support our military, guys, because, man, they went through hell. I can only imagine. To be honest, I can't imagine the little beefs I got on the street. The cops could stop it in a second. And, there's no cops in Vietnam to say, hey,
that's true.
Stop, you know what I mean?
That's true. We were... Yeah, listen, all of Vietnam and all these wars get mythologized, and nobody knows what I think reality is anymore. But I can say this, as I was proud of not only of that service, but I'm proud of the continuing service that I put out there to fellow veterans. That's one of the prides of my life.
They have the History Channel now, and they're showing from World War II to Vietnam nonstop. Yeah. And they put it in color now, with all the other stuff. And I said, wow.
Yeah, but it's a little like boxing.
Scary.
You don't get the smell, you don't get the fear, you don't get the
and it's
the
funny.
it's
not funny you say that, but I actually heard that testimony where he goes, "We came in and there was so many bodies, the smell was indescribable."
Yeah. There's all of that. But honestly and truthfully, looking back on it now, and I've asked other veterans and people from my war and other wars, would you do it again? And my answer is absolutely. Yeah. Because I was fulfilling my culture and what I was. So, I don't know what kind of statement that is, but that's a statement.
I mean, and Pat, it's even reached out to my own son. My son, Ray Jr., was in the first Iraqi war, and he served 2 tours. And I always tell my son, if you can't talk to Mimio, call Pat. And Pat has reached out to him a few times, and I'm grateful for that. I really am, Pat. So you know what, Pat? So you get back. You're a police officer. How long were you a police officer for?
I was in law enforcement for 31 years. Yeah, I did a variety of different things. Started off with the sheriff's office and, went to Naval Investigative Service. And the DA's office was like 90% of what I did at the end.
And he had some crazy stories with that one. That one particular guy that you had to go investigate in prison, he molested some boys.
Yeah.
That just, that has stuck in my mind. And you told me that story like 20 years ago, bro.
Yeah. Yeah, it was, I loved law enforcement for the same reason that I have this love affair with boxing. My job was to prove you innocent. And if I couldn't prove you innocent, well then really there's only one thing left. So if you do that and you have an open mind, you gather all the facts and you allow a fact finder to come up with a decision. And that was exactly what's going on in boxing. So it was, in some ways it was kind of easy, but more importantly is I didn't lose sleep over it at night. I didn't think, well, gee, I could have done a little better or worse. I did the very best I could, and then I went home. And that was it. So it was easy to do it. But when you see the absence of humanity, it makes you appreciate the human story even more. And for me, the human story has always been boxing.
Do you remember that particular story you told me about this?
I do. He died, and he ligature strangled a 9-year-old and a 13-year-old.
Oh my God.
Ligature strangled another person down in Florida. He was a good suspect. My partners and I agreed, and probably 8 to 9 other murders. It was a very difficult issue. It was the last case that I did. And the reason I got out of that business was, a conversation I had with an LA fireman, also boxing referee, who took a look at some of those crime scene photos, which weren't gory, and he said, gee, it's pretty ugly stuff. And I took a look, and I wasn't feeling what I should have felt as a human being. And that to me was the red light, time to go, and I did. But yeah, there were all kinds of those crimes like that, and they exist. But I would like to think that we have people that believe enough in working, that would run every lead down, that we can take those and remove that kind of threat from the community. That's what happened.
And thank you for that.
No.
Thank you for that.
It was a job, right?
Yeah. So Pat, you're doing law enforcement. Where did boxing come in? Where did you want to become an official, a referee?
Interestingly enough,
One of
I was
the best
getting ready.
referees in the world.
Well, I don't know about that.
I'm not just saying that.
I don't know about that. I thank you, Ray, appreciate the compliment. I would say that in return to you, Ray. You're one of the best. It's certainly at the current time, and maybe of all time, for doing what it is, because it's a great story. But I got involved, and I was going to box in the Police Olympics, which was a big deal back in the day. Had a medical issue, couldn't do it. And the guy over the shoulder right here, this gentleman, Junior Robles, took one look and said, hey, why don't you go back in and try refereeing? So I did, and it's, when you start off refereeing, I'm sure all the people that are professionals in the business or have been involved with it, is you start off with 8-year-old kids and 9-year-old kids whose helmet is probably bigger than their head. And my first memory of that was some kid got hit in the side of the helmet, and it turned around, and he was speaking through the air hole. And he was looking, I said, you okay? And I could see his eyes going up and down, but then he'd have to put his mouth up and go, I'm okay, ref, and put his eyes back down. So I was charmed right away, and I said, this is my kind of place. I had done this, and I understood what it was. And this one thing led to another, and it kept going up the ladder.
And just to backtrack, the quick story about Robles here.
Oh, Junior Robles?
He passed.
Junior Robles and Byron Lindsay, which are the 4 things you see in this wall. And again, I go back to the boxing culture. But Junior Robles and Byron Lindsay were part of that 1980 Olympic boxing team that was going to be a barn burner. I mean, Carlos Palomino's
Paul Palomino, his little brother, was on there. David Quito Rodriguez, a personal friend of mine.
Yeah.
And I was actually in youth authority when I'm sitting watching the news. And finish the story, please.
So we're doing all this, and we're excited because Junior actually was going to end up being one of the coaches. And the plane went into a lake in Poland, and everybody was killed.
Everybody 61 boxers.
61 boxers, and I think it was probably one of the major reasons we didn't go to the 1980 Olympics, along with the fact that Russia invaded Afghanistan. But I think we just took the heart and soul out of an Olympic team when you kill off that many athletes, wonderful athletes.
When I was sitting there watching the news, I'm like, wow, David and Palomino. I'm like, wow, it really hit home. David was in a foster home in Pomona. I was in a foster home in Pomona, and he was there. He wasn't in the foster home, but I used to go to the gym, and he like friended me, and we became close friends. His dad made sure he didn't hang out with me. I was a bad influence back then, but he was always there for me, and he passed away, man. Yeah, so that's a sad story.
It is a sad story, but it's a story of boxing. So Byron Lindsay and Junior Robles are going to live every day because every kid's going to ask who those guys are on the wall, and that's the culture. The culture is not only that, but you've got a history. So the history is there to help you along and move forward and stuff. Again, back to boxing.
So you decided to become official. Let's backtrack. Did you actually think a professional would come out of it?
Interestingly enough, the other gentleman over there, Bobby DeFilippis, who was the guy that ran the boxing shows in San Diego.
Pros or amateurs?
Pros. He was Pro Box Inc., and he had a great venue, and he started off in the 80s, and I was just started 80 or 81, I think, or 78, 79, and he was the one that started that, and they pushed because now they wanted local referees and local judges. And they had several. They had some really legends around this business. Frank Rustich, who did the original Ken Norton, Muhammad Ali at the Sports Arena back in 1973. Fritz Werner, the Colonel.
Oh,
I mean, we could spend all day about what a wonderful man Fritz was.
Talking about old school there, man.
Yeah, Hal Rickards. I mean, on and on. Well, they were looking for somebody who was going to be like the junior guy, and I was it. So they submitted it, and in those days it was, boxing's a strange business. How do you get in as a professional? If you ask me, I really probably couldn't tell you at this point. I could give you some possible routes, but there's no prescription like, I'm going to be a good amateur referee, therefore I'm going to be a good professional referee. If I was a good softball official, I could move up the ranks to the college level and maybe wherever else from there. Same with football, baseball, basketball. But I don't know how it happens in boxing. And so what happens is you come in. I came in 1980 or 81, I think. I came in with another gentleman in California, Lou Moret. He got in out of LA, and I came in San Diego. We were like the junior guys. And we were like small kids among giants. I mean, professional referees at that time included Lou Filippo, Larry Rosadilla.
Lou Filippo was in the Rocket movie.
Yeah, Marty Dinkin.
You've been in a couple of movies yourself.
Well,
Marty Dinkin.
None of them are good, but Marty Dinkin, guys that you may or may not know, but were just legends with us. And, on and on and on, Rudy Jordan, et cetera. So what would happen is because there was no formalized training, you would end up driving these guys from point A to point B. And I used to volunteer to do that because they're driving. Frank Rustich was a classic, and he would walk into your car and he would be smoking a cheap cigar, chew. And he was an official. He was a professional football official. He was basketball. He was baseball, professional boxing referee. He was just the ultimate official of all time. And so he would look over at you and make comments like, "Hey kid, explain the butt rule to me." And of course I would go on and on for like 10 minutes and he'd look at me.
But they had rules on paper?
They had rules, they just didn't have mechanics.
Oh, okay. There's a difference.
Big difference.
Big difference.
So he'd say, "Explain it to me." And it was like, I go on and on. He'd look, because he was a transactional guy and I was trying to impress Frank, he would look at me and he'd go, "Just remember this, kid. The guy who gets butted can never lose the fight." And under the old rules, that was exactly true. So everything he reduced down to something that you could use. Well, those are life labors and learned lessons. And that's it. I glommed onto that. Fast forward 8 years, I get my first fight, which is a regional title. 8 years to get a first title fight. Why? Because all of these legends are in front of you. And guess what? They're not moving. They're not moving until they have to. So it took me 8 years to get it. I got my first one, and then things kind of accelerated from there.
To history.
Well, I don't know about history.
History. But you're judging now, right?
I'm judging now.
As a referee, right?
I retired in 2015, and therein lies the story. And I'm going to say this to the community specifically. I would like to say this to my professional friends, to you, Ray, and to all the professionals that are out there. Thank you. Thank you for doing this, okay? I understand just how extremely difficult it is to be a boxing referee and to a somewhat little bit lesser degree, a boxing judge. But if you didn't get in that ring, and if you didn't risk what you are so that these kids could show us what they are, this would never happen. I made a vow that I was so impressed and so overwhelmed by the level of these athletes that my theory was I was going to have to be at the very best of my game. And if I couldn't be at the very best of my game, if I was going to do something that could in any way, shape, or form endanger one of these guys unnecessarily, and I say guys, boxers, unnecessarily, I was going to quit. So flash forward to 2015, I believe it was Tim Bradley versus Jesse Vargas. Good fight, actually back and forth, good action fight. Tim Bradley's ahead. It's the 12th round. There's 10 seconds left. He's starting to take a few punches, and I hear what I think is a bell. So I'm going to go in and stop the fight. Well, as it turned out, it was just a 10-second warning, I guess. I don't know. But I defined it as a bell.
And with that said, guys, Pat's taking charge of my interview for him, so, hey. he jumped ahead. He jumped ahead, but that wasn't the order we're going in. But that's Pat. He's taking charge. But with that said, you've seen it on the split screen that he was talking about. He's talking about. Say that one more time so the fans can see what you're actually saying.
Well, do we have that video? This is the one with
the video's showing right now.
Tim Bradley and Jesse Vargas?
Yes.
Oh, good. Yeah. Well, that's exactly
Tim
what
Bradley and Jesse Vargas. So what round? Any particular
12th
round?
Last round with 10 seconds left, and I heard a bell. Okay, so I heard a bell and I stopped it. Then I realized, oops, it wasn't a bell. I called them back together. It possibly could have turned into a real disaster. It didn't, and I don't think it affected the fight, but it certainly gave everybody a chance to grind that axe. So, Ray, do you want to interrupt?
Yeah, I do.
Ray's going to interrupt. Go ahead, Ray.
And I'm not just saying this, guys. That stadium was so freaking loud. You couldn't hear nothing in there, nothing. So you know what? Honestly, if there was no excuse, I'd just keep my mouth shut. But stop, guys. You know what, Pat? Seriously, all of us said you couldn't hear nothing in there.
Well,
is that why you're saying you retired?
No, let me give you the continuum of the story, right?
Okay.
So that's true. So I said to myself, because I had made a vow at the beginning, I will not do anything to unnecessarily endanger any fighter in that ring because of my physical or mental inabilities. I won't do that. That's my code. I'm living to it. So I went and saw a friend of mine who's a audiologist, good guy. And I went like a couple days later because I was devastated by the fact that I heard a bell, right? And we took some audio tests and he was talking to me about this, that, and the other. And he said, I asked him at the end, I said, hey, X, what do you think? Can I, use hearing aids or assistance or whatever else so I won't hear bells? He looked at me and he smiled and he says, you've got tinnitus and, a loss of hearing at certain ends. You're going to start to hear bells when there are no bells. Well, there you go, cold water bath. And I took one look, I heard that, and I said, you know what, I can't do this. And I called up Andy Foster, our boss, executive officer, and said, Andy, I'm going to retire at the end of the year, I'm done. And he asked me why, and I told him, I said, I'm just not capable, in my mind, of going forth and doing this anymore. And I did, and I retired.
And let me be honest, guys, it's a selfish comment, made room for me, but I just kept saying, Pat, we talked with Jack and all of it. You couldn't hear nothing in there, guys. Nothing. Yeah. The fight was that good. That's why.
But and let me continue this.
I remember the commentators did get a little. Oh, he didn't hear the bell. I mean, come on, man. Commentators. Let's be honest. And I talked to Sergio, Tim Bradley. They're entertaining, guys. Yeah. That's entertainment, guys.
Well,
the more they can make barbershop talk about the referee, if not the fight, they'll do it.
Let me continue with that, and let me address again the professionals.
And it's showing it again right now. It's showing the fight again right now, what Pat's talking about, the last round of the Tim Bradley fight.
Here's the deal, and here's what I tell you. That was a human judgment that I made based on the evidence, and as it turns out, evidence I didn't hear. And I was incorrect. There was no bell. So I have to own what I did or what I didn't do, and I did. And I had to take that and I had to put that down and say, where is it in terms of not just my career, but my belief in who I am? And to me, that was very clear and cut to do that. I would offer this to all of it out there. We don't expect you to be superhuman. We expect you to be human, but we expect you to own what you own, and then we can go forth with that after it's done. For most things, you're doing a judgment based on the evidence in front of you. If you don't have a lot of good evidence, you're going to make the best judgment you can, and then everybody can second guess it. But you've got to remove yourself from everybody whose agenda is to look about you being the issue, and that's how you stay continuous in this, because you absorb it like anything else. You don't turn it into an open wound, you turn it into scar tissue, and you move forward. And we need you, because if not you, then who? Marty Denkin said it best, and I'm going to say it to the professionals and to the patrons of boxing. You're never going to know, none of us are going to know how many lives you saved because of the skill of that referee in that ring. Can't argue with that. Can't argue with that, guys. And this is why I wanted to interview Pat. Integrity. That says a lot about him, because you know what? Hey, I'll be honest, guys. When you're in those big fights, Pat, and historic fights, isn't it an awesome feeling? Oh yeah, sure.
You know what I mean? So for him to say, That's it. Integrity, guys. Integrity.
Well, it's the game. You know, if you don't respect the boxing game, then you can't expect respect from the boxing game.
Well put.
Right? Pretty simple, in my mind.
Well put. All right.
How do we get down here, Ray? This is classic Ray and Pat conversation. The only thing missing from here is a third guy, and once we get going, trust me, we wouldn't be able to have a competent conversation. It'd be pretty funny.
So let's talk about these awesome fights.
Okay.
The first one we got here is
Bradley-Vargas.
I don't want to butcher his name because if I run into him, I don't want him to punch me out.
Sure.
Bradley, Pernock, whatever.
Yes, sir. Provo.
Yeah. What round is that really comes to light on that one?
We're going to do two things on this, and I'm going to invite everybody out there to go along with this. Ray and I are going to have a conversation.
It's on split screen.
Which is really a critique of what's going on. I'm going to tell you what I did and why. I'm going to give you kind of the background of all of this, and apologies to everybody. You really can't judge a full arc of a fight by looking at one round or one little incident or whatever else. You've got to see the full measure because that's what the referee sees, and that's what the referee is responsible for. But we are going to take these 2 rounds because I want to get Ray's opinion on some of this, and you can have your opinion. So jump on in.
Perfect. So what's my opinion?
Well, it's simple, and ask me why. Here's the background. Tim Bradley had just beaten Manny Pacquiao in Las Vegas by outboxing him on really, it was kind of a lethargic Manny Pacquiao. And the broadcasting agent at the time, which I think was HBO if I'm not mistaken, went nuts. And it was, oh my goodness, how could that happen? Manny Pacquiao was the champion, this was a challenger, this was not supposed to happen. Well, they had a great game plan. They came out, they started throwing punches and landed them. They weren't necessarily the most effective punches in the world, but they were punches that landed.
So you're saying Bradley was pretty much at the top of his game at
He
this
was
time.
at the top of his game, and he was being dissed by the entire industry.
Yes.
Well,
they were crucial on some of the judges.
Yeah, they went after the judges on that. I mean, it was a real nasty scene. Classic of everybody didn't want that result. So to do that, they wanted to blame some other reason for doing it. Well, Tim Bradley, like any person who steps into that ring, has pride in what they do. He has belief in himself. So you're sitting there getting dissed every day. Well, that's going to really chap your lips. And it chapped his lips. And the consistent thing that went over on and on was, well, he just boxed him and he was just tapping on him and whatever else. So he took this fight with Provodnikov, who was as tough a guy as you'll ever meet, who comes straight in to take 3 punches to give you one. That's his style. That's what he does. He didn't have to take that fight. He was the champion. He could have called something else to do it. But to get back at all the people that had dissed him, he took that fight. Equally as important, and I have not talked to the champ to get this confirmed, but I believe it, was he said, I'm going to sit there and I'm going to exchange with this guy. I'm going to show him who I am.
That was an awesome fight.
So those are we're going to see 2 rounds. I think we had 3 rounds scheduled. I don't know if we need to see the third one, Ray, which is round 6, but we're going to show the first 2 rounds, and all kinds of stuff happens because that was a complete different plan.
What round is that?
Forward. This is rounds 1 and 2 of this championship fight.
Walk us through 1.
Walk us through 1. You're going to see it as we're moving along right here. It's Bradley's out there pushing on the outside, and then he gets hit.
Yeah.
And the question becomes when he gets hit, what was going on? It stiffens him up. You'll see it.
Yeah.
I want you to go over there and take a look. In your mind, look and see, was he knocked out at that point? Was he moving forward? He does what every legitimate fighter is going to do when they're injured like that. Yeah. He reaches in and grabs the guy next to him so the guy can't continue to pound on top of him and beat him. And so what happens is you see Provodnikov moving around trying to get him, and then he takes him, and Bradley's hurt. Had he stepped to one side and punched him, he probably would have gone down. He pushes him down. So you've got a couple of blows that cause that issue, but now you have a foul, which is pushing a guy down. So what do you call?
No knockdown.
No knockdown.
No knockdown.
No knockdown. So it's no knockdown. Well, Bradley goes down, but he's hurt probably and concussed from those punches. And instead of going down and and letting me dust off his gloves or whatever else, he pops right up. Why? Well, I don't know. Maybe because he was a little bit concussed or whatever. Well, when he pops up, now he's really dizzy and he falls backwards and falls down again. So What was the intervening event between the punches that probably caused him to be, damaged or certainly having an out of body, the push, which was a foul, and the ability to go backwards and fall down again? Was there an intervening event? Was there a punch or a push or whatever else you could call? No. So now you've got a choice. If you've said that perhaps the reason he went down the first time was that he was pushed down, that's what your call was, because of the intervening deal.
So that's no knockdown.
No knockdown,
push.
and no knockdown on the other side, too. So Tim Bradley gets up, but he is a dazed and shaken fighter. Take a look. I mean, you don't have to.
You're seeing it right now, yeah.
You don't need me to tell you what you're looking at with your eyes. And he goes back to that corner, and his whole game plan was, I did that, and now what happened? Then he comes out for round two, and in round two, I'm just going to let you look at it and let you make up your own decision. Here's what referees do. Referees are designed to be the conscience of the audience. So we want to see a good fight, but we don't want to see a kid go out on a gurney. We don't want to see a kid go to a hospital. We want to see a kid maybe, who's going to have lumps and bruises and cuts and whatever, but he's going to come back. I lost today, but I'll be back tomorrow. That's what we want to see, because we're there to watch that experience. We're not there to watch a disastrous experience like that. So referees have to make instant judgments at all times. We call it deep water, right? When you have a kid who doesn't have a lot of experience and he's doing all this, where does they go? You're going to take him into the shallow end of the pool. You're not throwing him in at the 8-foot part and saying, okay, Junior, let's see you swim down to the other end. You're going to take him out where you can reach out and grab him if you have to, which is exactly what referees are doing. As they progress, you're going to take them into deeper and deeper water. If it's a world title fight, let's set the stage, Rage, for a world title fight. They may have worked all of their life to get this one shot to be the champion of the world at that weight. They may have started when they're 8 years old.
Yeah.
And then you've got a 24-year-old young warrior in that ring, tuned up, ready to go. Let's get this on, let's do it. You've got to be very careful to allow him or her to get the full measure of what they can do and pull them out. So what I say is that if it's a world championship fight, it's open air swimming. You're out in the ocean. The only thing I'm going to do is come along at the last minute and yank you out when I need to.
I think it was you. I went into a rules meeting with you one time, and you said you'll take them out to deep water.
And you don't let them drown.
Don't let them drown.
Exactly right.
That's what I got that one from. I told everybody I made it up, but Pat really did.
I probably just popularized it. I'm sure somebody else made it up. But that's true. That's exactly what referees are doing. So I would, again, caution you, take a look at round two here, and the rest of the fights moving forward. Championship level, open swim. Get out there and do what you can do. I'm going to be quick enough. I'm going to be good enough. I'm going to yank you out at that last moment. Look at Tim Bradley in this second round, and then at the end of that second round, you tell us, or you tell yourself, would you have stopped that fight based upon what you saw for the damage done by Mr. Provodnikov on Tim Bradley?
And put your opinion in there. The next fight, Toney versus Littles. Hey, I personally think Toney, probably a history-making heavyweight from, super middleweight.
Yeah.
He's not, is it just me? But they don't really talk much about Toney.
James Lights Out Toney, I had the privilege of working several of his fights, a couple of his championship
And the Littles
fights.
fight was a great fight.
Oh, well, Tim Little's unbeaten champion with Lou Duva. Bill Miller was in the other corner with James Toney, who at that point was 165 pounds, I think. And he was a tuned-up 165 pounds.
Sharp, man.
It was great. It was at the old Olympic Auditorium. It was one of the last events they ever had at the Olympic Auditorium.
What round are we talking about of that? Any particular one?
We're doing rounds 3 and 4, and the reason I wanted to bring up 3 and 4 was what we just discussed was at what point do you stop a fight? Okay? And what you're going to see in round 3 was Toney, who was deliberate and sharp and really cracking Littles, and Tim Littles, who was a terrific fighter, was starting to feel a little pain and punishment and whatever else. As you watch this thing, at the very end, towards the very end, the last 20 seconds or so, they come together, and the next thing you know, there's going to be a cut that you can't believe. They're going to show it. If you get a chance to really look at it deeply, I can tell you I looked at it, and you'll see the doctor look at it. But at that cut, you could see the bone on the cut on the top of his eyebrow. I mean, it was that nasty a cut. So the question then becomes, was it caused by a headbutt, or was it caused by a punch? Because if it's caused by a punch and he can't go on, TKO.
TKO.
If it's caused by a headbutt, well, then if, depending upon the round, it's either going to be, and in World Championship Boxing, you have to start the 4th round before you go to the scorecards, right? Well, this is the end of the 3rd round. Guess what? It's not going to be, it's going to be declared a no contest or a technical draw or whatever the issue is besides a contest with that. So that's what goes on, and you can hear the narrative. I don't know, are you going to hear the narrative with this too? But you can hear the narrative, and then the commentators are going off about it and whatever else. But the other thing I will tell you was this, is one of the reasons you didn't get an instant response from me doing stuff was at the very last punch, I used to have a technique of sticking my hand in front of a guy's face, thinking he wouldn't crack on you, which he doesn't, because, it startles you enough. But I took a shot from James Toney that kind of dazed me a bit. So there's about 10 seconds there where I'm just looking around, trying to get the sparklies to come back. That's the human story, right? Yeah. So I knew what I had seen, but I was having a difficult time with the brain housing group trying to get that out to people involved. And so that's what happens. And of course, the announcers, when they don't see it immediately, are going out of their minds, and they don't know the rules enough to realize.
Thank you.
In California, it's timeout, and you can bring that doctor in, and the doctor's the one that makes the call. If the doctor says no fight, guess what? No fight. End of story. So you're going to look at that. You're going to look at that cut, and I want you to take a look at that. But this is what the difference is. Do you stop the fight at that point? And he had to convince the doctor, who was Tony Hicks, Dr. Tony Hicks, I believe. Great doctor, a ringside guy. And this is what he does for a living. Is he's
a surgeon. He's
a surgeon. He deals with those things, so he knows it backwards and forwards. And I could see Tony kind of shaking his head, saying, "I don't know if this cut's going to make it or whatever else." And basically, his corner, I think it was probably Bill Miller, that said, "Look, just give him the next round. Just give him this round."
All he needed, huh?
And then we did it. Well, if we got him to the 4th, then we're going to go to a decision. He thought he had a chance. But the look on Tony's face when they said, "You got this next round, I want you to take a look." And then just, the next round speaks for itself.
History.
The next round speaks for itself.
And in another fight, another barn burner, Alvarado versus Rios won.
Let's set the stage for this one. This is at my favorite venue, the Home Depot Center, which is
outside.
I'm not sure what it's called this week.
They change it all the time.
But it's the Home Depot Center.
Dignity or something.
Yeah, it's the greatest. You look right down on the ring from
bad there.
No, it's just wonderful, and it was great crowds. You always get great crowds. This fight was a 10-round fight. Okay, so we're talking about deep water. I want everybody to keep that in the back of your mind. And we talk about open swimming for world championship contests, right? This is not open swimming. This is, you're going to have to be a little closer. It's a 10-round fight. Mr. Rios and Mr. Alvarado apparently did not like each other, because from the opening punch through the end of that fight, I don't think that there wasn't a tap going at all. Everything was
hard.
Turn the hips, the punches go over. It was just a horrendous thing to watch. I mean, horrendous. It was a wonderful thing to watch for me. But, my job was like, oh my goodness, what's going on? And I'll tell you a little side story about this. Brandon Rios, who is a character, and he loves to fight. One of the instructions that referees give is that they tell the fighters, look, it's your job to convince me you're okay. Because I don't have a portable MRI, I don't have a screen to look inside your brain and see if you're having electrical disconnects. So if you can't respond to what I'm doing, or if you're doing something that's going to be dangerous, guess what? Fight's over. That's on you, not on me. That was one of my instructions. So this is going on. The reason we compress this, we gave you like the last 30 seconds of 5 or 6 rounds, and then we give you the last round. The reason we're doing that is I want you to see something that the referees see, and Ray and I will talk about it. But at the last 10-second warning, when they heard that little snap, they would get together, and it was just like a nuclear exchange. Bang, 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 bang. I had to bop in between and got bopped a couple of times, stopping them because they weren't going to stop.
They were both known as brawlers.
Brawlers, oh yeah.
More than boxers, I would think.
Tough guys, just tough guys. So they did that at the end of each round. Well, in one of those rounds, and I've forgotten which one, I think it was 2 or 3, just as the bell rang, Alvarado connected with a right hook, and it caught it caught Brandon Rios on the chin, and literally his head came around, and his body was facing forward, but he was looking at me.
Yeah.
And as he's looking at me, I'm looking back at him, and I'm thinking, what's going on, and how are you dealing? But I think in his mind, what he said was, and forgive my language, he knew that I was concerned about that punch. He knew that maybe he had taken a punch too much. He looks at me, and he looks me right in the eye, and he goes, I love this effing shit.
That's Rios for you.
I mean, what is he telling me? He's telling me I'm in. I'm okay. I'm good.
Yeah.
And I love it, and let me go. So we did. At the end of the round, I think it's round 6. At the end of round 6, I want you to tell me the difference. I can tell you right now, Ray and I would do this, but the last 10 seconds they got together and they were nuking them out, back and forth, etc. What happens in that last round before it stops? What does one fighter do? Alvarado starts circling. Well, for a referee, what that is cambio, y'all, a change. Something has changed. The accumulation of this damage may be setting in. Maybe he just doesn't want to fight anymore, but something has changed. So, boop, your radar goes up, and that's something as referees and as fans and as patrons of the sport, you need to understand that's what's going on. So, given that, then look at the last round. The last round explains itself. That fight was stopped before there was any more damage done, and there was a lot of inquiry at the time about, well, why would you stop it? Well, the answer was it was deep water, but it wasn't an open swim.
Yeah.
If that had been a world championship fight, Ray, would you have continued it?
I'm gonna say the right thing now, but at your level, Pat, I don't think I've reached your level.
But well, yeah, you have. First of all, thank you, Ray. It's very nice being modest. But yes,
I remember that fight.
But
I was ringside, but that's what I'm saying, guys. That's what I'm trying. Pat's explaining to the fans is, you got to see these things. You got to see their body language. Like he said, he's seen the body language. He's seen something was up. Something was turning. The guy could be in a fight all day long, and Alvarado was a brawler to the bone.
Man.
You could hit him with a baseball bat.
Tough guy.
You know what I mean?
Tough guy.
But yes, in that time, he starts circling, and I go, whoa. Brandon Rios seen this obviously the same thing you're seeing. You know
Exactly.
what I mean?
And they're going to close the deal on that. That's what they do. So take a look at that and realize this is what referees are doing. And what that does, and I call boxing fans, I call them patrons, because fan is one side of it, which is short for fanatic. But the patrons come and they understand, they have a deeper understanding of what's going on here than any of the rest of us really do. And I don't think we should insult them with it, but I want you to see what the inside is, what it's like from this point of view.
Awesome. And the other fight is Larios and Vasquez.
Everybody's got the love for anybody, etc. But I want to say that one of the greatest fighters I ever had the honor to step in the ring with, and one of the nicest human beings I ever had an opportunity to meet and know, was Israel Vasquez. He was just a warrior, and God rest his soul. God bless you,
Passed
Israel.
away, yes.
This year he passed away from cancer, I believe. But Israel was a warrior. If you go back and look at his record on BoxRec, I mean, there was no tomato cans. There was no anybody.
He fought everybody and anybody.
He was the real deal.
Hi everyone, Andy Sarukian here, co-founding partner of Remedy Law Group. We represent employees in all types of employment cases, whether it's wrongful termination, discrimination, harassment, retaliation, failure to pay wages, provide meal or rest breaks, misclassification. Website is www.remedylawgroup.com. Give us a call. My number is 818-422-5941. Happy to answer any questions you may have. Free consultation about any potential case. Look forward to hearing from you.
Hey guys, Sonora Tires, 17977 Valley Boulevard in Bloomington, California. They do tires, mufflers, brakes, alignments, air conditioning. I've known Armando for almost 12 years. Him and his son do great business there, reasonable prices. So check them out, Sonora Tires. Tell them Popeye Ray sent you.
And he fought a series of 3 fights, which we'll talk about the last one, which is with Rafael Marquez, which are legendary. But he fought 3 fights with Oscar Larios, who was a world champion. The first fight was...
No chump himself, you know what I mean?
No. The first fight was in '97 in, I think, in Mexico City. This is the second fight. which takes place in Sacramento in 2002. And I forgot, in February, I think, of 2002. And it is a barn burner. We're showing you 2 rounds at the end. The 11th round, which is a good
round.
Bang, off it goes. And we're showing you that, but we're showing that toe-to-toe
It's
action
showing right
that they
now,
go
guys.
for. And what you're seeing is really a compilation of what had happened in the first 10 rounds. I mean, it was just toe-to-toe. In the first fight, Israel Vasquez had knocked out Larios in the first round. So either he caught him cold or something else had happened, but boom, he was gone. So Larios...
Look that up. That's...
Yeah, Oscar Larios, Vasquez won in 97, I believe it was.
Look that one up. We'll put it up. We'll get it on there. I'll tell my editor to put it on there too. Just quick one.
So at the end of this, Larios had adjusted his game to really get himself out of that rut and do this. And it's a terrific fight. I think Larios is winning. I look back on it now, I have a kind of a mild idea that he was a little bit ahead. But Israel Vasquez is not giving up. He is going to fight till they took that bell off. And if you tell him to fight in the hallway, he's going to fight in the hallway too. That's just who he was.
Yeah.
So this 11th round, you're going to see what it was. And then we start the 12th round. And again, I want you, the referee, to take a look and realize what I'm seeing in my mind, which is this accumulation of serious blows over 11 rounds, over 33 minutes of what's going on at this point. So you see that stuff, and then we see the 12th round. Knowing that he's knocked him out before, Larios has got a game plan for him, and you tell me the decision you're going to make. What I made, and what I will tell you is that he took a horrendous knockdown. He got hit, I think, on the left ear. And he was really dinged, and he went down hard. I gave him an 8 count. He got up. I said, Israel, you got to show me something. Israel comes back out. He takes another horrendous shot, and he goes down, and he's on all fours on that canvas. And I'm looking at him, giving him a count. World championship fight, less than a minute to go, or maybe a minute and a half to go. But it doesn't make any difference. It could be 10 seconds left. If this fight needs to be stopped, it's going to be stopped. And I'm looking at him, and he does something that is very difficult to explain. But the way he coughed and he looked at me, I knew that fight needed to be stopped. Ray, you could probably talk to that. You've seen people that it was over. It was done.
I actually looked at this yesterday, and he just looked bad, a dangerous bad.
Yeah.
So again, I'm not just saying that. That's why, again, I interviewed Pat, because you got to know, guys. I mean, I know that fan up there in the top, he wants brutality. Is it fair to say brutality? But their lives are in our hands, guys. And we owe it to you, as much as a fighter, to keep them safe so you can see them again.
Amen.
So you can see them again.
Well stated, Ray.
And that leads us to this last one.
Well, let me give you the last thing about this fight.
Yeah.
So, I think Teddy Atlas was one of the ringside announcers, which is a high standard. Teddy doesn't tolerate anything less than perfection in his performance. And legitimately, he loves the game, and that's who he is. And
teach his own.
And all they could talk about was fight of the year. Oh my goodness, this is the best, and whatever else. And you know what it was? It was all of those things till the next day. And the next day was Arturo Gatti versus Mickey Ward. And guess what people remember about the Larios-Vasquez fight? Zero.
Yes and no, Because you know what? The boxing enthusiasts remember them both.
Yeah.
Especially our Mexican fans, which to me, they're 99.9 are Mexicans. Arturo Gatti, I'm not going to take nothing. That was a great fight.
It was a wonderful fight.
But you could walk away, you could go to work Monday and say, the fights this weekend were the bomb.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
The fights this weekend were the bomb. 2 awesome fights, bro. Those stick in your mind,
Yeah, but just so you know, and again, I go back maybe to the professionals that may be viewing this.
Well, let's just be honest. What if it was switched from the Friday to the Saturday?
I don't know. Yeah.
They would have still said,
yeah.
Hey, you should have seen the fights this weekend.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's exactly what it was.
Guys.
That was just a privilege and an honor to be in there. But in that 12th round, Israel was done, and without ever quitting, because I don't think he could quit. I don't even think the letter Q was in his alphabet. He could not quit, but at that 12th round, he was done, and I knew it, and we had communicated that and did it. That leads to this fight.
The Vasquez-Marquez 3. Guys,
Again?
the trilogy. Hey, guys. This was the Gotti war, but the smaller weight.
Yeah.
And those guys could have. It's not just sloppy fighting, and I'm not disrespecting those type of fighters. These are skilled shots, guys. Skilled. Oh, what a beautiful. I mean, it's just artwork. You know, if you're a boxing enthusiast, this is just skill that is ridiculous. And you know, heart on both sides, you can't beat it, bro.
Brilliant corners.
Great refereeing. One thing I do remember is when he fell on the ropes, some referees wouldn't even call that a knockdown. But you know, if you fall on the ropes, that's a knockdown.
Yeah. Well, it reads helpless on the ropes. It doesn't say just ropes are supporting you, but you're helpless on the ropes. I want to set this thing up for a little bit for the viewer.
What round are we going to talk about in this?
We're going to talk about the 12th round. We'll just let it speak for itself.
From 1 to 12 was just.
It was, well, first of all, there were 3 fights. The first fight, Marquez beat him because he couldn't come out for the 7th round because his nose was broken. The second fight, Vasquez won a decision, I think, or I don't know if he won a decision or whatever in Texas. And then within a year, this was the 3rd fight that they had for this triumvirate. It happened within a year. Well, here's the other thing that happens when you have 2 really good fighters, really good tactical corners, really good understanding of each other, is that they adjust their game on each fight.
Yeah.
So this 3rd fight was as close a fight as you will ever see. In my point of view, from the get-go, I knew that I was in with something that was just going to be beyond special.
Yeah.
And it's like the whole thing compressed into like a minute and a half. The bell would ring, and all of a sudden they would go at each other, and you were just all full of it. And the next thing, ding, 10-second warning, and then you stopped that round. That's what each round was like. I had to take a point over there because Israel, who used to blade, was getting punched in the hip, and he got punched in the hip so many times that finally, I had to tell Marquez, hey, listen, I have to take a point, dude. You can't do that. But this 12th round, I want you to keep in mind with the 12th round that you just saw that he had several years earlier with Mr. Larios. And look at the difference that takes place. And let's just play that 12th round.
And such a great fight, guys. Again, we rest in peace, brother. We're going to miss you, but you will always be in our history books.
Absolutely.
Bro. You will always be talked about, brother. You know what I mean? That was such a great fight. You know what, Pat, I want to go on longer, but before we go, what do you feel about your judging now?
You know, it's interesting. There's a couple things, and again, I'm going to tell especially I'm going to talk to, if I can just briefly, to the patrons of this, is that the professional, the difference between that, because you can argue about this. We're making a judgment based upon what we see. But there are a couple things that you have to take to the bank. First and foremost, each and every round is a separate fight. So if there are 12 rounds done, there's 12 separate fights. And so each fight is going to get the credit it deserves with a winner and a loser. The second thing is the professional referee or professional judge has to make a decision. There has to be a 10-point decision made.
But Teddy Atlas said 10-10.
Well,
that's what he said. He's a perfectionist.
Well, exactly. But I'm not gonna dispute Mr. Atlas. He's got his own theories of doing that stuff. I'm talking to you about the person who gets paid to make that decision, and the judgment is you've got to make a decision. Some of them are fairly easy. I mean, most of us can pick out when one guy dominates another fighter. But what it gets difficult is you have to remember is that each round they're going to adjust their tactics. So when they come out, that's not going to happen. You're not going to be able to fall in and see that. And the part that is amazing to me is it's like a horse race. You can win by 3 lengths. There's a winner in that race, or you can win by a nose. And where the professional makes their bones is that they've got to make a decision on each and every round. The last thing I'll talk about real briefly is the criteria. And I think everybody gets confused. What's the criteria? I hear it now a lot as a judge because I get to talk with the patrons a lot more than I did when I was doing the referee job. Well, let me tell you what it is. When they say effective punching, just flip that around. The punch had what effect? If I hit Ray 5 times with my little pity-pat punches and he cracks me and knocks me down, which punch had more effect? So who's going to get more credit for that punch? The same with effectiveness and defense and ring generalship.
Is it fair to say that's why the Vasquez fights were kind of hard to judge?
Sure.
Because they were both effective.
not only both effective, but they were pros at masking when they got hurt.
Yes.
You know, here's a rule that I've always been
Is it
aware
fair
of.
to say that's a hard one to
Oh,
judge?
yeah, sure it is. So judge that one. Go back and look at this fight. Do the 12 rounds and judge each round. It was a split decision on this fight. I'll tell you that right now. So, and those were 3 world-class judges doing that stuff. But that's what judging is for that. So judges have reasons for coming up with the decisions they come up with. My suggestion is if you have a disagreement, have just as good reasons, or at least look at the reasoning they're using. That's all I'll say about judging. Right?
Well, but at the same time, do you agree with me, Pat, where I always say if you really are critical on our judges, any judge in the world, turn up the volume when you're watching the fight at home.
Absolutely.
So you don't get that influence of the commentator.
Sure.
Turn up the volume. And it's got to be a 10-9 round. A knockdown is 1 point deduction. And then at the end of the fight, you're going to say, wow, that guy did win.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
And more importantly, when you see those really close rounds, if you went back and looked at the scorecards, the MasterCard, you would see that they split out different ways.
Yeah.
And that may be the angles and whatever else they want to talk about. But that's really what's going on with the judging part of it. I love the judging part of it. As I can't say as much as I love the refereeing because there's really almost a different kind of intensity to it. But there's a real good sense that when you give what your experience and your knowledge, and you give credit to that kid in that ring who's done the very best that they can. You know, I think that really enables and promises them that you're going to get the just reward for the effort that you put out.
All right. Well, with that said, Pat, we'll have them on again. If the fans see you at a show, can they come
Absolutely,
and say hello,
and
give
I would
autograph,
say that.
take a
Please.
picture?
Yeah, you know, if I'm working in the middle of the ring, don't tap me on the shoulder and say, let's have a fight. But you get to see me now because I'm not really as involved as a referee or whatever. Please walk up and talk to me. I mean, I get it from the fans all the time. Why'd you score it that way? Well, let's talk about it.
That's right.
You know, let's go over it. I have no problem doing that. I think that's great. You keep me doing the thing that I love to do. And I think you need to know everything I'm doing and the judgment I'm making. I have no problem talking. I'd love to do that. I'd consider it an honor. Thank you.
There you go. With that said, guys, I want to thank you, Pat, for coming on. We'll have you. I'm thinking of doing a few judges and a few referees and just sit down and talk about just boxing.
Sure.
You know what I mean? That'd be awesome. But hey, guys, get on YouTube, Third Man in the Ring, or Ref Pop by Ray, and subscribe and share and tell your friends. But again, thank you, Pat, for coming on. Love you, brother.
Love you too, brother.
Thank you for everything.
Real pleasure.
Your service.
So long, patrons. So long, fans.
God bless, guys.